This is an American. For 2,000 years, we were a stateless people, but now we have a country we can call our own. Through all of the perilous times since Israel's founding, we have called on the brave men and women of the IDF to defend our home. And then he buys TikTok. Like that's not a dual loyalty trope. That is a dual loyalty example.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
The signifier enters into the signified.
Yeah, we have to keep saying that. We do have to keep saying that. I mean, it's uncomfortable to to point out these observations.
Judeo-Christian emerged with the state of Israel to say, we have a shared history. But if you want to map out what a signifying chain like this looked like, I started with white, because obviously that's important. And white, not just the race. Like race is one direction of the chain, I guess. But you can also go to white as clean, white as snow, or white as purity, or white from the laundry detergent commercials. Stain free. You get your whites white again. But all of these actually eventually link up when, for example, immigrants are described as dirty, or when they're described in terms of infection. You go from white to clean to purity to health, and then you get all the opposites. So white as opposed to dark, as opposed to sickness, as opposed to dirty. And you can see the way that both the antonyms line up, or they're applied to people in the real world, right? So you get the symbolic chain of clean to white to pure just tracks perfectly with racist tropes.
Hello, Plastic Pills listeners. We're back trying this again.
We're back in our country. You're back in our country. Actually,
I'm back in your country.
Eric is not.
Eric is not in our country.
I'm in a foreign land.
Speaking of gooning, and you can answer this or not, do you have to sign in with your ID to watch porn in Britain?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Or you haven't tried yet?
There's ID laws here. No, you can't look at anything without doing some kind of. I think it's either you have to upload your driver's license or take a photograph of yourself and give it to AI, and it will judge your age based on your there's a couple methods, I think, but yeah, it's this UK wide policy where pornography is strictly controlled here, and you have to do the age verification kind of thing. So people are oh, screw that. So gooning is extra hard here. No, not really. I was on the bus the other day on my way to work, and some person was sitting in front of me gooning real hard. They had Hinge open. They were fucking. I guess, does that qualify? You're on Hinge or whatever, a dating site, and at 6:30 in the morning, just hitting Hinge hard on the bus on the way to work. That feels like
I don't think that
to
really
me.
counts.
That is giving your brain a dopamine bath at fucking 6 a.m. That is gooning in my books. I had to move away because I'm not watching this guy. I'm kind of sitting in a seat that's sort of raised up over, so I'm just watching this person on just trying to crush dates. So I'm thinking, no, fuck, I gotta move to another part of the bus. I'm not watching this in the morning. Because I'm trying to slow my brain down.
To be clear, though, pornography. He was not masturbating.
Not literally, not a la lettre, but just the wider version of gooning that guy proposed. What's his name on the
Daniel
video
Collitz.
We watched?
So he's metonymically gooning,
like what Drake was doing when that drone spotted him in the middle of the day gambling and drinking. What was he drinking? So yeah, that qualifies as gooning. Or when Kanye goes around with his naked wife at public events.
I'm going to pretend I understand those references and say, just when I thought we were done with Lacan, I found something else that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And look, I don't want to be too strict about the Lacanian concept that we're introducing today, because Lacan himself is not very strict about it. I guess he never fully finished it, but I think it has a lot in common with other structuralists, and the term is signifying chain. Now, I think that the signifying chain will help us understand a troubled young man by the name of Nick Fuentes.
I think the signifying chain helps us understand all right-wing discourse.
What about left-wing discourse?
We use this term, he used it specifically, but discourse means like whatever's happening on Twitter to us. But you're right that the signifying chain is what discourse is largely.
I think a lot of left-wing discourse too, but I think a lot of left-wing discourse tries to be like a full speech, not empty speech.
It tries. But do you think, yeah.
That's kind of batting for the home team over there, are you?
It's a little, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm super confident about that. I think.
No, I'm not either. I'm just making simple binaries.
I'm making sure. Because I guess I just feel like I prefer the signifying chain of the left, but they're both like the same.
That's my chosen chain.
Chain me up. Chain.
Chain me up.
Congrats to Zoran Mamdani. That's good, at least. That's some good left-wing news, but...
Yeah, that should be interesting. I mean, it feels like it's more interesting to hear about than it's actually been, but
yeah,
maybe I haven't been getting my fix of politics.
I haven't been following it much either. But Fuentes, I have somewhat been following.
He's on what they're calling a meteoric rise, which is a turn of phrase I never understood because meteors do not rise.
They do not.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I've never noticed that. Also, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That's true.
They're either like going in the direction they were going, or they're falling into like a gravity well.
They're
but
just
they
going
don't
fast.
I hate inaccurate metaphors. I hate metaphors that don't make sense. Yeah, he's the opposite of socialism, or some might say.
But Fuentes, I've been like just my own sick curiosity with like weird right-wingers online. He's someone I've been, I mean, I don't want to say I've been like following him, but I've been like kind of watching him. I remember the first time I noticed his stuff was after the Zizek-Peterson debate. He reacted to it, and I had no idea who he was.
Oh wow, you've been on this bit for a while.
Yeah, for a while. Like, and I didn't know who he was, and he was like this young kid, and I'm supposedly on the right, and I just remember finding it amusing that he thought that the stuff that Zizek said made more sense to him.
Wasn't he like 12 when that debate happened?
I think he was like 19.
Okay.
And he was talking about how like at least Zizek was saying some stuff that made sense, but Peterson was just fixated on this fantasy of individualism. Yeah.
If I were to try to do some Hegelianism, I'd say that Nick Fuentes is the Aufhebung of the current right-wing discourse. And I'm not committing to that, but it sounds like that's something that would be right to say.
Yeah, I think historically it overcomes, it cancels, it preserves. It's the next thing.
I guess the way that I would make sense of him and the way that he's situated in right-wing discourse right now is, I think there was a time when, especially like kind of neocon conservatives in America were like very pro-Israel. I guess like the way that I see, like, if we want to think about Fuentes as being some kind of rift or leading to some kind of rift, is that he flirts with racism and anti-Semitism in like a pretty overt ways. But I think also like the fact that he's gaining some steam, and you know, he did that long interview with Tucker Carlson, which I did listen to. I don't know why. I just hate myself, so I wanted to listen to these.
I watched that too, so that's where I'm getting most of my information from as well.
Yeah, and I think like what's kind of interesting about him is I do think that like some people who are just critical of Israel for like legitimate reasons that probably all three of us would want to be critical of Israel about, right? Like the fact that, for example, the U.S. just gives them, you know, billions of dollars for weapons, discomfort with obviously the way that they've handled, more than just discomfort with the way that they've handled like the October 7th Gaza response. So all these things that all of us would probably be critical of Israel for, it's almost like Fuentes is using that and then getting right-wingers to be like, yeah, maybe Israel kind of sucks. Like, why are we paying them so much money? And that also is related to another theme, I think, emerging with Donald Trump of kind of protectionism, America first. It's like, which was always sort of a subtext in American conservative. I mean, Ronald Reagan used to say America first, but this kind of more overt America first discourse is like, why would we give money to anyone else? But that's so, it's almost like he's using like kind of legitimate criticisms of Israel, but then to use those legitimate criticisms to basically be like, but maybe it's the Jews, right? It's not just like Israel. Like maybe it's actually like Jews that suck and not just Israel that sucks. Like that's kind of my sort of common sense, like oversimplification of, I think, what's happening. It's like use legitimate criticisms to be like, my stuff about, because Fuentes, I think, is always, I don't know enough to say for sure that he's like come out and questioned the Holocaust, but he's probably questioned like the numbers. And this is obviously like
he's flirted with questioning it. Yeah,
he's flirted with questioning the numbers. And this is like the classic thing that I think some conservatives do is kind of like these days is kind of not go all the way, or at least like far right is sort of flirt with it and be like, I'm not saying that the Holocaust didn't happen. I'm just asking questions. I'm just like, well, do those numbers really make sense? And like, okay, yeah, I get that it's like the Israeli government, but like maybe there's something about Jews also that like is the reason. I'm just, asking questions here. I feel like that's sort of the move, right? It's not as overt as like classical kind of Ku Klux Klan Nazi racism. It's more like, I'm just trying to be critical and like, notice how we're giving all this money to like Israel and the Jews and banks. And it's like, it's this step. And I don't know how we can apply signifying chains to that. Whereas before, right, I think that in the past conservatives, like even the Christian conservatives would have been like, no, like Israel good because Israel is like a partner in Western civilization and Judeo-Christian values. And like fucking, conservative evangelicals had a huge hard on for, the evangelicals, because when the Jews return to Israel, that's supposedly, supposed to be when Christ might come back. And like, I know Mike Huckabee is like one of those evangelical, I think he's the American ambassador to Israel right now. And he's like huge pro-Israel guy. And again, I think that's motivated by this. So that's, I feel like I see like this rift in like this isolationism, like America first, and like, why are we giving the money? And then people can be like, yeah, Israel, why are we giving so much money? But then like, that's sort of in the background underneath being pushed towards a, like, why do we like the Jews kind of thing? Like that's being pushed that way. Whereas the other is still more either neocon, but then also with this kind of religious evangelical drive toward like loving Israel because it fits with Judeo-Christian values. And maybe there's some kind of, I don't know, is it correct to say messianic kind of like motivation towards liking Israel, like wanting it to be maintained? So I don't know, that's sort of my summary overview of sort of how I see this, and maybe we can now start applying theory to it, or maybe there's something I missed that you wanted to cover, because I know, Pills, you also watched the Fuentes Tucker discussion, so maybe there's more in there that I didn't touch on.
I did more than that. I did homework. I watched 3 hours of Fuentes actually this week.
Oh, nice.
I think I know exactly how theory fits with that. Like what you were saying about how Fuentes, like, we'd be questioning the allegiance with Israel, but for very different reasons. But it's essentially like the same objective critique, but coming from different way. You know how in that article, like the agency of the letter that Lacan writes near the beginning.
For our listeners who are unfamiliar, Agency of the Letter in the Unconscious is an essay by Lacan about...
Oh yeah, context.
We haven't introduced it yet. It's in Écrit. It's about how structuralism fits into psychoanalysis.
Well, he puts that picture near the beginning, right? I think if you're a theory fan anyway, you might be aware of Saussure's signifier, signified. You have the signifier, the sound image connected to a concept, and it's represented graphically. In Lacan, he puts a big S and then like a bar and then a small s underneath it. The bar just looks basically like a bar in like a math equation, like 1/2, but it's big S over little s. And near the beginning, he doesn't like this sort of barred picture, so he puts the two doors, the two doors, and puts men, ladies, and gentlemen over top of it, over the bar. Like, so the two doors on the bottom are identical, but you see gentlemen and ladies above it, and those are different. So okay, he's talking about men's bathroom and women's bathroom. But the two bathrooms under the bar are the same, but the two signifiers on the top are different. And he's using this to illustrate how the signifier enters into the signified, and how that there's a slippage of the signified underneath the signifier. And that is what I want to say applies to this, right? We're both like, there's a left-wing way and a right-wing way of being critical of Israel, and it shifts over time. There's a slippage there. And now the right has sort of launched its own criticism, and you have the same situation. These two identical doors on the bottom, door on the left, door on the right, and the only difference between them is the signifier written over top of it, right? It's like how wearing a poppy has become controversial lately. You have two identical poppies on the bottom. Well, some people there's been these debates about like it has the right like co-opted wearing poppies now. And there's now this like debate around wearing a poppy and whether this expresses like some kind of political allegiance. But in the end, you just have the two identical poppies on the bottom, and the only difference is the signifier written on the top part. That's how, and the slippage of the signified in the signifying chain, and how the signifier enters into the signified. That's how I thought. Yeah, I realized I didn't set the context there. I just we had a power outage earlier, and we'd already started talking about this. So, like, in my mind, context had been set.
Right, and context of the poppy is in Canada from World War I. There was poppies that grew on graves, and then we're supposed to wear one on November 11th.
Well, wasn't it also the poppy fields in Flanders fields where they fought in, like, is it Belgium or did maybe?
Yeah, Belgium and the Battle of Ypres.
World War I, yeah.
Well, they do it in the UK too. There's
yeah, they do the poppy in the UK.
And they read it over the announcements in the morning. In Flanders fields, the poppies grow between the crosses, row on row. It was written by John McCrae, a Canadian poet. Yeah, Canadian.
Wait,
I made sure everybody was aware of that.
Canada was part of Britain basically during World War I, right? Like we had to go if they declared war, we were automatically declared war.
Yeah, that's true. We did automatically.
We were independent country still, but yeah.
But I think that wasn't true during World War II. I think World War II we had more independence where we could have chosen not to, but I think we just did declare war at the same time.
And we're very proud of that, which is right-wing coded, I guess, when it comes to poppy. Anyway.
Whereas for America, of course, it's America first.
That's why it took them years to even enter the war.
So if you didn't catch that, Eric gave kind of a critique of Sirs signified that explains how the one meaning can like have multiple meanings depending on its place in the, and here's the key term, the signifying chain. Yeah. Now, we can't really abuse the signifying chain concept all that much because, like I said, it's not fully fleshed out. But what he does say about it is that it's made of signifiers, and these signifiers, they're linked together. So you can see this when you get a term like Nick Fuentes likes to talk about. When you get the term white, has a very important meaning to Nick Fuentes, and then it's attached to different links for him that it may not be attached for me. I'll say that I'm not in my mind all that concerned about whiteness as much as Nick Fuentes seems to be. But everyone, this is where it gets a little tricky. Is like, does everyone have their own signifying chain? Kind of, yes. But you don't build it from scratch. It's not like you're special and unique.
No, it's socially constituted.
This is why we're bringing it into terms with like discourse, because basically you have a signifying chain that organizes your beliefs based on signifiers and the signifiers that are most important to you. But Lacan says, like, your knowledge of these signifiers and your experience with these signifiers matters very little, because actually these are pre-constructed and you find yourself in them. And yeah, you could probably change. Like if your parents are religious and conservative, you can definitely adopt a signifying chain that is, I don't know, atheist and not conservative. However, you don't make these connections yourself. You're basically given these connections. So one thing that's really a consequence of this is that so much of speech, I think Eric earlier called it empty speech, so much of speech when you get in a discourse, which is like managed by social rules that are particular to that community, so much of speech in that context is automatic. Like you don't choose what's said. And part of the reason that this got set off for me was because we said after Mr. Kirk had his little accident over there, I said I was so frustrated because it was an exciting event, there's no moral content. I'm not saying there's any moral excitement. It was exciting, like adding heat to a solution. It was an exciting event, but all the responses to it were so rote. Like you could have predicted what everyone would have said in advance, like we condemn violence, blah, 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 blah. This is part of this signifying chain when you get this automatic type of speech.
Well, it's the same thing, I think, with like the kind of lefty Twitterverse. I think it was also predictable to see that there would be like a bunch of woke leftists who'd be like, I'm glad he's dead. He got what he deserved. Like that was also its own kind of automatic response, I think. Right? I mean, so.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was not.
Yeah.
Like so almost, that's and I guess I was also thinking about. Yeah. Okay. So it's like an automatic response. I was also just kind of thinking about what is like a conservative, like signifying chain of like, and I guess it's like things that. I was like so there's two things I was trying to disentangle, because I guess there's like one sense in which like you think like one concept kind of like leads to another, like you might say like family, and then that makes you think about values, and that makes you think about like morality, and then Christian, and like I don't know, like law and order, freedom, patriotism, troops, like I don't know, just like things that like would lead you to other concepts. But then it seems like there's another sense, if I'm remembering this correctly, in like a Lacanian point where there's like in sentences there's like a retroactive meaning where like as you're hearing the words or hearing a sentence, it's like meaning isn't maybe it's a point about meaning, like that it's not decided until like the end word of a sentence. And I thought that also had to do with signifying chain. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I don't know. I feel like this is maybe I'm getting two things mixed up.
No, that's right. It's because the idea of the chain is these links, is it's not a closed system, which is a different view of language or meaning, is that you can have closed systems. But this one is because there's links in a chain, you can always continue to add to it.
Yeah.
So then because you can add to it, then the meanings can change, and that's how you kind of explain the evolution of discourses, which, to bring it back to our current topic, Fuentes getting attacked by the other conservatives on the grounds of changing one of the signifiers, it shows evolution, right?
Yeah, because I guess beforehand, right, like in the sense, the kind of Mike Huckabee evangelical sense, like maybe Israel Jews would have been associated with like ally or like democracy or like Western civilization or like shared biblical values or something, right? Like maybe those would have been kind of like like concepts. And then maybe now
I checked the Ngram, the Google history of word use.
Oh yeah.
Judeo-Christian was only used like one time prior to 1948. It was by Nietzsche too.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, it's like Judeo-Christian emerged with the state of Israel to say, we have a shared history, because if you know anything about history, the Jews and Christians, they didn't see themselves as on the same team until relatively recently.
Yeah, exactly. So like I guess that would have been maybe some kind of and then now I guess like the Fuentes, the Groypers, and obviously this is, you know, just bringing to the fore something that sort of existed in the background, where like the concept of Israel is maybe now it's being fought over, like what that means, or like what, you know, maybe Jew and Israel are like, you know, makes some Fuentes style conservatives think of like deep state or like elite or like globalist, right? Globalist is another one of these conservative pejorative terms. And like, you know, like, yeah, I don't know, like it's, you know, trying to shift that meaning in that chain from like biblical ally to like, you know, foreign parasite. And then it's also maybe interesting to think like what would like a left-wing kind of pro-Palestinian, like how would their signifying chain about Israel be organized, right? It would obviously be different. It would be, I mean, maybe there'd be some shared, but it would probably be more like genocide, you know, it would be like genocide and like colonialism. It'd be like colonialism.
Yeah, true. We'd have to spend so much time, like, I like reading the transcripts, because the transcripts, they don't let you get seduced in the personality of like Tucker and Fuentes. Instead, you can just like see the words and you can see what actually connects to another word. So Tucker,
like having a robot read it.
Oh, that's a good point. Like ChatGPT, it functions making signifying chains. That's why it's like largely accurate, but then suddenly inaccurate on certain discourses, because it's basically associating words that have been associated. But yeah, I think contrary to some critiques, I don't really think, from my limited experience, I don't think Nick Fuentes is either a Nazi or a white supremacist. I think he's best described as like white identity politics, whatever you call that.
I tend to agree.
Because he literally says explicitly, like, identity politics is a bad word in that signifying chain. But he says everyone else is allowed to do identity politics except white men. And white men are getting screwed by the three groups is feminism, immigrants, and Jews. And every one of those groups is allowed to do identity politics except white men, and then when white men do it, then it's chauvinist and racist. And to that, I gotta say, like, they did do that. Identity politics is for everyone except white men. You know, the Fuentes rallying cry is, hey, let's get all the white men together and advocate for what benefits us, because we're getting screwed too. Everyone's just saying we have male privilege, white privilege, but we're not, because we're getting screwed too. So if we can get a handle on the immigrants and the women go back to the kitchen, and we get rid of the Jews that control America, then we can have our day again finally. That's the core, I guess.
That is the core. I agree. I mean, I think there's like a bunch of arguments for why his concern about identity politics. I mean, he's like right in a certain like very basic level, but I guess the purpose of identity politics, and look, I'm been critical of identity politics. Obviously, anyone who's been listening for any period of time would know that. But obviously, there's a difference, like when you think about the fact that identity politics emerges specifically to address issues of disadvantage to those on account of those identity characteristics. So I feel like it just wouldn't make sense to have identity politics for white people. Now, what does exist, and I think continues to exist and has always existed, in terms of like celebrating, because, you know, that's one thing Fuentes might say, it's like you can't celebrate being white, but people celebrate being Irish and Italian and all the time, right? There's fucking St. Paddy's Day. That's like an identity politics day. That's like a kind of white identity politics day. So, I mean, I quibble with the way that he frames that, but of course, like, I kind of know what he's talking about. But it was funny though, like, okay, so like, but then on the idea, like, is he actually a white supremacist? I mean, it's hard to tell, but what he does do is and there was actually a bit of a disagreement between him and Tucker. I don't know if you caught it, Pills, but it's when I think Tucker's like, well, I just judge people based on their individuality, right? And then initially Fuentes kind of agreed. He's like, well, yeah, of course. But then he started to say, but like Jews are different. They're, they think as a group. And Tucker's kind of like, well, like, I don't know, like I know plenty of Jews who like disagree with Israel, and that like that's just seems wrong. So like Tucker did kind of, Fuentes did kind of want to go a bit further and suggest that there is something intrinsic in Jews that makes them want to only worry about their own kind, which strikes me as like definitionally racist, right? In the sense of like,
in that interview, my power went out, so I lost my tab. But I think he specifically said it's not genetic, which is like not laudable, but it exists. Right?
Well, he says it's not genetic, but he also
thing, right?
But he still thinks there's like value and like there's value, utility in generalizing about Jews, right? And like, but yes, he does think that the cause is maybe social, but it seems to be like a very strong social cause. And that also, I mean, that seems just clearly wrong to me, but
I like Lacan's concept here of that sliding of the signified under the signifier, under the chain of signifiers, because it's just so typical that a concept like identity politics gets its sort of right-wing articulation. It was already laid out in advance, and now it seems in retrospect like inevitable that identity politics would see its right-wing articulation, even though it was like the leftist thing in the 80s and 90s with political correctness and identity politics. But then it's easy to forget that identity politics goes all the way back to questions of national identity, which emerged in the modern era. Groups and the tribe versus the individual and individualism. You have the right and left-wing articulations of all of those things. I mean, the chain of signifiers is always outrunning the meaning that it generates.
Well, I find it funny that Nick Fuentes is catching all this flack from the right wing, because literally, if you line up their chains, I think the only signifier that they disagree about is either Jew or Israel. I'm not sure, or maybe both. But when it comes to like immigrants or women, like there's no difference between Nick Fuentes and Matt Walsh, except Nick Fuentes is funny. The only thing they disagree about is the Jew one. But if you want to map out what a signifying chain like this looked like, I tried, so I can tell you what I came up with, which is just, it's not exactly a line. It's not linear as much as it is web. Symbolic web is one of the other experimental terms that he tried to describe what this is. But I started with white, because obviously that's important. And white, not just the race. Like race is one direction of the chain, I guess. But you can also go to white as clean, white as snow, or white as purity, or white from the laundry detergent commercials. Stain free. It gets your whites white again. But all of these actually eventually link up when, for example, immigrants are described as dirty, or when they're described in terms of infection. You go from white to clean to purity to health, and then you get all the opposites. So white as opposed to dark, as opposed to sickness, as opposed to dirty. And you can see the way that both the antonyms or the antagonisms between those line up, or they're applied to people in the real world, right? So you get the symbolic chain of clean to white to pure just tracks perfectly with racist tropes. Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment versus the heart of darkness, or the dark continent, right? So once you start with a symbolic chain, it doesn't have to be automatic, but it seems to be pretty automatic. And you saw that with just like the straight up racism against Mamdani for being I think they're saying he's dirty for eating with his hands. We can get into that too, but like, he's a terrorist in Sharia law, and he's dirty because he eats with his hands. Which I don't know. We could, since it's a discussion on the symbolic order, we could go all into that too. Like, we have a whole symbolic order that determines which things it's polite to eat with your hands and which things not. Like pizza, chicken wings, ice cream cones, those are all acceptable things to eat with your hands. Rice, of course it's Twitter, so we could take it with a grain of salt, but Twitter freaks out that he's eating rice with his hands. Look at this barbarian. He's not one of us.
That's interesting.
All of those contradictory meanings, they just coexist in this symbolic.
But then what do you do with dirty? You have to clean, purge, bleach. I don't know if I want to read this because it's okay. I'll read it. I can't say I don't know if I want to. I found a tweet from an account named Pericles. 2,000 likes. So this is not a cherry pick. He says, Zoran Mamdani eating with his hands, despite there being forks in front of him, reminds me of the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah demanding to rape the male angels, despite Lot offering them his virgin daughters instead.
Jesus.
Which is a fascinating tweet because it associates women with utensils, with forks, and brown people who eat with their hands to rapists who should be purged with fire.
As they say, reveals a lot more about the author than it does anything else.
Also, is he implying that like using utensils is more natural, like heterosexuality is
it's
natural,
really weird.
like wanting to rape a virgin woman is more natural than a man? There's a lot in there, Pericles.
And then imagine if that account were a bot too. It would also be like, it wouldn't even be shocking. It wouldn't be shocking that some weirdo said that, or that a bot has just sort of algorithmically assembled those words. And I don't think it would make a difference because that's the language that's out there. That's the language that's out there. Those are the word associations, right? We internalize the other, as we established. We internalize the other of language, and AI does that too, just differently, but it does it. So of course it's
aesthetically that's pretty. It's a pretty good metaphor. I mean, morally it's repugnant, abhorrent, but aesthetically I don't think an AI could have done that one.
Yeah, I don't know that like being named after this like Western Greek hero and then going straight to a sexist biblical narrative that it reminded him of. I can't, but I could see AI putting that together, building that out of, engagement with weirdos in the comment sections.
It could be. It's the point of that was the purgation part, right? He's like the people in Sodom and Gomorrah got they got meteorited. They got hit with fire from falling from the sky and burned up. So there's again the dirty needs to be purged. Yeah, it's a meteoric biblical account.
And the extraordinary absent subtext besides the racism and the sexism is the socialism too, because of course being a capitalist is also baked into that cake.
On the good side.
True.
Yeah, you ultimately get a whole side of divisions of all the good things and all the bad things, and there's very little, like, to speak of signifying chains being automatic. It's pretty noticeable when someone breaks the code of their community because that gets blown up. Like, oh, you were against this group of people. Now you're not a real leftist. But at the core of this whole thing that I drew out very scientifically, by the way, is that white equals good, and that doesn't necessarily correspond with the white as race, but it often does, right? It's often recruited for that purpose. Just like white is sinless and the bride wears white at the wedding because she's pure, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know.
I can apply this. I was going to apply that to Fuentes.
Yeah, do that.
In order to say why he's not a Nazi, because the Nazi rhetoric about Jews, it's very dehumanizing. It uses insect metaphors and rodent metaphors, spiders, rats, and that really that dehumanizing stuff. Fuentes in the 3 hours that I've listened to him, okay, there's probably examples that I don't know about, but at least in his current iteration, I don't find that he dehumanizes the Jews. He doesn't think that they're dirty or maybe evil, but more than anything, I think he believes that they are rivals. They are rivals to white people in America, and they have their tribe. And in order to combat them, and it's mainly Jewish billionaires like Ackman, is it Ackman and Ellison, the guy who bought TikTok? Yeah. We need our own tribe in order to be able to combat them. So he does. I said he wasn't a white supremacist. He does dehumanize immigrants and blacks, but the Jews, it seems like he has a begrudging respect for them because they're able to keep their tribe together so well.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I think Zizek has pointed out how a lot of Nazi rhetoric was a strange contradiction of like dehumanizing via like mentioning rodent or insect, but then also like talking about them as like an evil kind of calculated, like hiding in plain sight, can pose as a German and be successful like a German while sort of infiltrating society, which obviously, but is like not flattering in a certain sense, but is also like not dehumanizing in the same way as a rodent. There's like a weird contradiction where they're like both dirty and unhuman while also kind of like scheming and like effective.
It's that enemy paradox of like respecting your enemy. Like you got it. If they hate their enemy, they also acknowledge that their enemy is something to be respected.
Yeah, exactly.
Some kind of paradoxical like respect mixed in with the hatred, but that makes the hatred all the more virulent.
But look, like all these efforts to sort of just, want to reductively label any sort of reactionary right wing figure as a Nazi is like also something that I'm sympathetic to being is a little too much of a simplification. But then I think what's also kind of fascinating to analyze here is like the pushback from people like Ben Shapiro, right, who are furious, who are trying to excommunicate Tucker. And actually, like one of the most interesting parts, I don't know if you'd agree, Pills, of that Fuentes interview with Tucker was sort of hearing the origin story of how initially Fuentes was sort of falling into a Ben Shapiro crowd, and he himself was also, not necessarily initially an America First worried about Jews, but was more of like a Marco Rubio, maybe not Marco Rubio, it might have been Ted Cruz. He was like a Ted Cruz Republican. And he sort of fell into like a Ben Shapiro crowd, and one of Ben Shapiro's people was like, you got to see this Nick Fuentes guy. He just did this debate with this liberal student at, I think it was Boston University. But then as soon as Shapiro noticed that like he was asking questions about Israel, according to Fuentes, at least in the interview, he started to tweet about Fuentes as being like a dangerous person that shouldn't be followed, right? And then and in a way at the time Fuentes had like no followers, and Shapiro, the analogy I think that came up in the episode was like, oh, he like tried to squish you like a bug before you could get any followers, right?
Smother in the crib.
Yeah, exactly. Smother in the crib before you, but it didn't work. So that was kind of an interesting part of it, but
I guess the reason it's catching on so much is because like what he says is true, and it's not like individual Jews are helping the case any. Like the Larry Ellison thing, we're gonna, because I've heard people like Shapiro say, "Oh, it's just the age-old trope, like he's accusing Jews of doing dual loyalty." But like Jews are doing that. And I don't mean the Jews, I mean specific.
There are particular Jews.
Larry Ellison said in public, there is no greater honor than sending the IDF millions of dollars a year of it, like just for fun. He said for 2,000 years, this is an American. For 2,000 years, we were a stateless people, but now we have a country we can call our own. Through all of the perilous times since Israel's founding, we have called on the brave men and women of the IDF to defend our home. And then he buys TikTok. Like that's not a dual loyalty trope. That is a dual loyalty example.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
And if they did, like, if he didn't have all this evidence at the moment, like he wouldn't be catching on like he is. But he can.
He wants to run.
Does he?
He wants to run. I think he wants to be a political leader if he could be. He wants political power. I feel like he said it in several interviews, including, I think, the Tucker one. I thought he said, like, I want political power. I want to influence
6 million people saw it.
18 million.
The attention brokers have given him the shot, and he's got, look at some of his categories: hates weed and alcohol, porn is destroying men, toxic feminism.
Yeah, how about that porn part? Did you clock that part, Pills? Because it reminded me of
when Tucker asked, "What is porn?"
Yeah, he was like, "What is it?" He's like, "What?" It's like, come on, man.
His rhetorical questions have just gone too far.
Yeah. But then they started getting into some stuff that I feel like reminded me of the Gooner discussion. But anyway, but it's just like, which again, like this is the weird thing I feel like about figures like this is like they will say some things. Like I mean, a lot of what they say has like a grain of truth to it, right? And then like that's how.
I mean, it's more than a grain, you know.
Yeah.
I will say, I think he has a demonstrably fact-checkably false world picture, though.
Yes,
but
exactly.
it's not that off. But like, there are Jews in America who are on board with the foreign policy of America as it's existed until like the last 2 years. But the Nick Fuentes his world picture doesn't have Chevron or Exxon or Halliburton or Pfizer or DuPont. Like, he thinks the Iraq war was caused by Jews. And he thinks that America is run by Larry Ellison and Bill Ackman, which are two billionaires that love Israel and are Jewish. But what about the Koch brothers and the Waltons or the white, like what about all the white ones?
All the Christian billionaires.
Yeah, all the like in his world picture, America is just this hoard of resources. Immigrants are taking a bunch of them, and then the rest of them are being sent to Israel, which is just a false picture. Like, it's the wealthy as a class in America who control most of this hoard of wealth that is America. And that's a material fact. It's not speculative.
We get to the conspiracy theories.
But and then like there are things that happen that make you, that like I see why people are tempted, right? By which, like you mentioned, like Larry Ellison, but then also the way the media, like kind of elements within Trump's orbit, right? Like trying to deport that like student who had a student visa because they wrote a piece being critical of Israel, right? It's like when those little things happen, you're just like, what the fuck is going on here? Like I could see why people would be tempted to buy into a conspiracy theory, because it's like you're not going to have like, you know, you'd never see like a lobby, I don't know, like an Armenian lobby that if you see someone denying the Armenian genocide, they're going to get deported if they're like not a student, right? Like no one cares about that. But that doesn't happen, right? It's just like an Israel adjacent, or, you know, because there's a bunch of intermingled interests and military and financial interests at play here. And yeah, there probably are like some really rich, you know, Israel adjacent Jews who, you know, do have an interest in trying to pay a lot of money to preserve Israel's image as best as possible. And that can look a little creepy, right? And that can like invite a certain kind of conspiracism that ends up being counterproductive. Those actions can end up being counterproductive.
I mean, it is on another level with Israel. Like if for both parties,
And universities,
I don't know
too,
how it happened, but it's on another level. Like, anti-Semitism is its own special kind of racism. Like, there's more than a grain of truth to it, but it's like...
Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
You should have expected this. You guys made this happen.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the Jews, you guys. I mean... I mean the political establishment.
Yeah, we have to keep saying that. We do have to keep saying that. I mean, it's uncomfortable to to point out these observations because it can be used as ammunition, right? For real anti-Semites, like I think Nick Fuentes. I don't think it's outside. I don't think it's over. It's an exaggeration to say that Nick Fuentes is an anti-Semite. I think he probably is.
He says his best friend's Jewish, so I don't know about that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, massive generalizations.
If we're going to suddenly decide that this guy is evil, Israel's the only thing that differentiates him from PragerU or Charlie Kirk or Matt Walsh. He has exactly the same opinion on everything else except that.
I do think that making generalizations about an entire people is kind of racist, and I think regardless of if he thinks it's caused by culture, he's doing it. He talks about the Jews having plans, that is anti-Semitism, but I take your point. I understand what you're saying. I just do think it's, and look, I'm not someone who likes to throw around isms and accuse people, but I just feel like the evidence to say that he's some kind of anti-Semite is pretty fucking strong, regardless of.
I'm not even going to defend that. I think he is, but it's it's fine. It's everyone else is fine with the entire conservative movement being racist when it's Muslims.
Yeah,
it's we have this.
Yeah, sure.
They have a special signifier,
special protection
of racism that's not allowed,
Yeah, and it's interesting the overlap, and then because there's people like Candace Owens too, who is a black conservative who's used to work for Ben Shapiro and now has gone hard against Israel. But I don't know, that's what's really interesting about internally in the conservative movement. Because when it comes to left and right, whatever progressives, it's pretty obvious that the reasons that they're critical of Israel are really different than the reasons that a Fuentes or others, although there's obviously a bit of overlap. But I don't know. I feel skeptical that Fuentes really cares that much about the Palestinians. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just feel like he maybe doesn't care. But then when you get to someone like Candace Owens, at least the way that she talks about these things, in my limited but not nothing observation of her, it's kind of gets interesting because it
clearly a moral position.
Yeah, her perspective seems a bit more moral. I mean, she talks all the time about children being killed, and her Christian values make her be outraged about that. But and that seems a bit closer to the, I guess, progressive position than it is to the we're wasting all this money on Israel and the Jews are trying to steal and control our government. And seems more like a humanitarian Christian, if we take Candace Owens at her word, which some may not unreasonably not want to.
Well, I don't even know if she knows what her words are. She's a couple steps away from it.
She also thinks that the French president's wife is actually a man. So,
despite having pictures of her and her supposed brother that she replaced, or vice versa. Anyway.
Yeah.
Leftists are hostile to the idea of an ethno-state, right?
Yeah.
And Nick Fuentes is not. He just wants to be in charge of or he wants an ethno-state here.
Yeah, he wants a white ethno-state, probably. Although he's a little bit evasive about that.
Yeah, it's hard to know if that's what he wants or if he just wants white people to be winning.
Or if he just wants to be an edgelord and kind of if he just wants to be sort of provocative.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms that I find it very difficult to interpret Zoomers with, whether you can say, well, they believe something else, but they're saying this performatively as something that contradicts what they believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is a question, and maybe it's a plan for future study or something like that. But Nick invokes often Catholicism and the Catholic Church, and he says, because I'm a Catholic, I love everybody, which sounds...
Well, that was also interesting. Yeah, that was also kind of an...
So you got to dehumanize people.
There was an interesting thing going on there, too, because that was, I think, related to the conversation that him and Tucker were having where Tucker was like, well, I don't hate a whole group of people. I just like judge people on an individual basis. And Tucker claims that's what my Christianity commits me to, is to just judge people on their individual merits. And that was sort of interesting. It felt like he was putting Fuentes on the spot, because Fuentes also invokes Catholicism all the time, but does seem to want to judge a whole people based on them as a category. So
this is what I mean is a question, because another point about signifying chains, they can't be contradictory. You can only contradict, or they can only appear contradictory if you're observing them from the outside. But obviously, what I think Christianity is, or what better yet, what a historian or an archaeologist believes Christianity to be, is going to be very different from the place that it occupies in a right-wing ideologue's system of beliefs.
And of course, American Christian right-wingers have a long history of supporting things that seem quite anti-Jesus-y. Like, I loved Al Franken's The Gospel of Supply-Side Jesus, his joke gospel to make fun of American Christian conservatives, where there's like a part in it when his disciples are following supply side Jesus around, and he's like, Jesus, shouldn't you heal the lepers? And he's like, that would just make them lazy. He's like, leprosy is a problem of personal responsibility. If I was to heal the lepers, there'd be no incentive to avoid leprosy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's a moral failing. That's very medieval.
Many such examples. But if you're trying to map out the signifying chain here, is Catholicism like part of it centrally, or is it kind of an exogenous like thing that he just said? I can't figure that out, because it doesn't make sense to me. And like knowing what I know about Groypers, I can't imagine that these guys are in church on Sunday morning. And if they are,
yeah,
maybe I'm the one who's out of touch. But this doesn't seem like the Christological or papist. This is the other thing. Why do American right-wing Catholics never mention anything that the Pope says? Because the Pope is not on board with their shit over here.
Yeah, he's definitely not. And he's American too.
And I thought that was the whole thing of their religion is, what does the Pope say? Anyway. I don't know how central the Catholicism, because Catholicism with its many thousands of years advanced symbolism and its symbolic chain or signifying chain, that doesn't seem to get much use from Fuentes as I see it. He just kind of declares, I love everybody, but I love white people the most.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, it's hard to tell in the environment, like if he's popular because people agree with him, or because he's norm deviant enough. He's the first guy on the scene with a different signifying chain than the establishment authorized signifying chain that doesn't seem to be working for people.
Yeah, exactly.
Very much anymore.
Yeah. I guess the way that he appropriates these images and symbols and signs, and the degree to which they resonate with an audience, and how his popularity is the official discourse on those things is insufficient. The fact that there's resonance with a huge audience, and that they never mention what the Pope actually says, but they claim to do things in the name of Catholicism, which is obviously just, this is the suppleness of signifiers and semiotics, is they can be freely appropriated. There's no commitment to any previous meaning that they have. You can simply re-signify, and if it catches on, it shows something. I don't know what it is, because you don't, the owl of Minerva always flies at night. At dusk. Looking back, oh yeah, it was bound to go that way. But when you're on the brink of it, you don't know.
Oh, start with Hegel, end with Hegel. So my uninformed Hegel take is like, if you let the white boys into identity politics, then we'll have tried all the versions of identity politics. So what's left after that? Class politics. Because class is not an identity. Class is a fact of your relation to the means of production. So maybe Nick is going to conclude the ideal dialectic in history, so we can finally recognize our position in the material historical dialectic.
It's really hard to imagine what white identity politics would look like.
Racism.
Other than just racism. Exactly. Because I was just trying to think, it's like, you have to say that you're oppressed by, I guess, other races. So that's, I don't know. I mean, obviously that's maybe like being overly reductive about what identity politics is, but it seems like it kind of is that, right? It's like different races talking about how they're being oppressed in a unique way. And I guess like white people doing that does seem to me to only lead to racism. And then maybe that'll lead to class politics. Yeah, hopefully.
I think we're on our way. But Fuentes is against, or women are the ones who are oppressing men, because they nag at them and they take positions of authority when God didn't give them one.
Oh yeah, he's extremely sexist. Actually, that's something he for sure is.
This is interesting. I wrote. I forgot my book over there, but on the signifying chain, I was writing it while I was listening to him. Like, what words does he say, and then connect them to other words. And one of them was he connects Jews to women because they're both nags. So in his view, you have women and Jews both trying to tell real white men what they can and can't say. Like, oh, you can't make jokes about Hitler, I think was the topic. But just like women tell men that they can't make sexist jokes, Jews tell white men that they can't make Holocaust jokes, which of course you should be able to do. So both of them are nags in deciding what's appropriate. So we need to overthrow the Gyno-Semitic hierarchy.
It's so strange that this populist appeal, this like us versus them thing, but with enormous numbers. It's like, oh yeah, it's white versus like other races. Like, again, huge numbers.
There's a lot of gripers that aren't white. That's another thing that I find hard to understand. And Fuentes is like, what, a quarter Hispanic too? It's hard.
Mexican and also friends with Kanye West famously now.
Yeah, I had dinner with Trump and Kanye. I see that marked up.
We could say, look at all the contradictions, but again, in a signifying chain, they're not logical. Contradictions don't see
friend of the show J Reg's video. I think it was like the political right meta update, and he argues that there's such thing as a post-racial fascism.
Oh, did you see Nick Fuentes responded to J Reg for that?
No, I didn't.
Because J Reg correctly pointed out, friend of the show, that all these fascists are no longer white. And then I think Nick Fuentes said something like, yeah, that's just something the Jews tell you.
As if to prove the point.
Oh, that's so weird.
That's good.
Good times. That's good note to end it on. All right.
Good note to end it on, yeah.
Signifying chains pops up a lot in like structuralism, which I think we need. Structuralism, everybody just dismissed because post-structuralism. But you got to remember that post-structuralists are still like 80% structuralist. We threw the baby out with the bathwater, unfortunately.
Well, that is such an interesting story that the main structuralists got translated into English after the post-structuralists. So we were getting translations of like Derrida before we got translations of like Gramsci, right? Oh, who the fuck is Gramsci, right? Yeah, exactly, right? Like the structuralists got translated way later and given a lot less attention. By the time the Anglo world was reading structuralism at all, it was post-structuralism, and it was like, oh yeah, structuralism was dead on arrival. That itself is a whole interesting story about how it hit the English-speaking world in this weird order that killed structuralism before it even took off.
Speaking of which, we missed that, what was it? The continental philosophy is unserious thing? Maybe we have to read that next week.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Another one. They keep trying to kill us, but we're not dead. All right, we'll end it on that note. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we'll goon you later.
We'll goon you later.
I think you need to re-listen to what that episode to find out what gooning is, Eric.
It's I'm appropriating the term. I'm gooning out, boys.
I gotta go goon to my signifying chains.
I'm gonna go goon in the kitchen with my roommates.
Oh, did you see my new vape? By the way, we're at the end, but my vape is now.
It looks like a cigarette.
It's just a dowel. It's a piece of wood that I suck on.
Oh, literally.
Yeah.
Oh, there's not actually anything in it?
No, it's just a piece of wood.
It's just to address your oral fixation.
Oral fixation.
The substance itself.
What am I displacing? It's a metonymy. It's a metonymy for a vape.
Yeah. Nice.
Ah, sick. I think I see a merchandising opportunity. Slap a pill on that.
Yeah, they are selling like air as instead of a way to quit vapes, they just sell flavored air.
You should sell plastic pills.
The pills tried and tested method of quitting smoking.
Just suck on a piece of wood, you'll be fine.
Pills wood.
All right, we're not going to do any metonymical analysis of that statement next time.
All right.